Hello and welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the industry's leading podcast for the global metal packaging market. The Metal Pack Pod is brought to you by the Metal Packager, the number one digital resource for the global metal packaging market. Thank you to our sponsors, PPG Packaging Coatings, a global leader in innovative, safe and reliable coatings. Their range of innovative and sustainable solutions help protect and beautify the world. Our podcast was recently voted in the top 10 packaging podcasts globally, so be sure to like our podcast and receive regular updates when the latest episode drops. In today's episode, we welcome Dr. Nick Silk, Head of Product Development and Customer Technical Support at Tata Steel UK. In this episode, Nick speaks about the company's sustainability initiatives, particularly the electrification of packaging steel. We discuss the industry's shift towards decarbonisation, aiming to reduce carbon emissions by 2050. Nick also highlights Tata Steel's goal to halve the carbon footprint of tinplate products by 2030 and the transition to electric arc furnaces to increase recycled content. Despite market challenges, including tariffs and economic pressures, Tata Steel is committed to leading in sustainable steel production. This episode underscores the importance of industry collaboration and government support in achieving these aims. With over 35 years in the metals industry, Nick is an expert in steel processing and products and is directly involved in the 1.25 billion project to convert Tata Steel UK to low carbon footprint steelmaking. We hope you enjoy the episode. Good morning, Nick. Thanks very much for joining me. Looking forward to an interesting conversation about the latest developments at Tata Steel. So, first off, welcome and looking forward to a good conversation here.
Thanks very much, Alex. Good morning to you as well, and very pleased to be able to speak to you this morning about this subject. Great. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I mean, we're obviously going to be delving into Tata Steel and the exciting consumer campaign that you've got in terms of electrifying packaging steel, but it must be an interesting time at the moment. You must be dealing with lots of conversations regarding tariffs and latest. I know we've had some budgeting information here in the UK recently as well, so there's plenty that we can delve into, but I think first off, if we can just have a little bit of background behind yourself, for our listeners that perhaps aren't quite as well acquainted with Tata Steel and yourself as well. So if you can give us a bit of a brief overview about your career background, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I work in Tata Steel UK, which is part of the Tata Steel Group, which is a global steelmaking group making around 35 million tonnes of steel per year. I'm a passionate metallurgist, so I'm really a scientist at the end of the day, but I run a big department that does product development and manages our customer interfaces. I've been working in the sector steel industry for sort of 30 plus years, but particularly the last 25 focused on strip products and those products that go into our downstream assets, in particular Trostra for our packaging steels, but indeed, as Adrian said in a conversation we had outside, things like automotive and other key market sectors like jute, etc., and construction. So that's my background, and particularly focused on technical roles, actual product design, how that feeds through to the performance at our customers and the products they manufacture. So.
No, that's really interesting. No, thanks for that. Thanks for that overview. We'll get into a little bit more detail about what's going on at Tata Steel shortly. But I'm just curious. You mentioned that you've been in the sector for 30 years. I mean, what's been the biggest change during that period? You must have seen some shifts within the steel sector. So it'll be interesting to deep dive into that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, well, I suppose the current big shift is the biggest shift, realistically. The sector has been, running on a shoestring for many years. There's been not much change in asset configuration, etc., in the steel processing world. And then sustainability and decarbonisation has come along. And apart from the sort of slight derailing due to the financial crisis and COVID, basically the direction of travel has been one of how on earth are we going to decarbonise by 2050 and meet climate targets, etc., for Paris Agreement. So really, the asset changes that are likely to come about as a result of decarbonisation across the industry is going to be massive and wide-ranging, and by far the biggest change in configuration across the steel industry for 50 years. So it's a very exciting time to be in the industry, I must say.
Absolutely, and that probably leads us nicely on to the exciting new campaign that Tata Steel have. So if you can introduce electrifying packaging steel in more detail, and quite curious to learn a little bit more about the potential benefits and certainly halving carbon footprint by 2030 seems, from an outsider looking in, seems some ambitious targets. But yeah, looking forward to finding out a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, the packaging market is one of our priority markets, routes to market for our steel products. And electrifying packaging steel is a way of demonstrating and communicating that message clearly to can makers and brand owners that, our steel making investments at Port Talbot are going to transform the way we make steel, transform the products we manufacture, and that will affect particularly recycled content, but also the carbon footprint. And just to give you a feel of why that number is so big, that reduction in carbon footprint, from our traditional steelmaking processes, we're emitting around 6.5 million tons of CO2 per year. We're going to drop that to about 1.5 million tons. And of course, that doesn't directly translate through to the final products. That's a reduction in absolute CO2 emissions from our assets, but that absolutely will feed through to at least a 50% reduction in our carbon footprint of our tinplate products.
And I know you've been doing the rounds in terms of trade show activity in the first quarter of this year. I mean, what's been the general feedback? I'm quite interested to learn what the also the feedback from retailers and supermarkets has been as well.
Yeah, well, I think we've had some very positive feedback at the conferences we've been to, and I've only been to one particular event recently myself, and that was really focused on can making. And if you like, the sector as a whole in terms of the manufacture of the products rather than brand owners, but certainly positive feedback, and certainly people are very encouraged and excited to hear what's taking place and what's going to be possible.
That's good to hear. I mean, I suppose the elephant in the room at the moment is in terms of tariffs for the steel and aluminium industry. I know globally the issue of sustainability has certainly been front of centre for the last, probably since the Blue Planet 2 David Attenborough moment. That was the case when everyone kind of realised, certainly for in terms of our industry, the metal packaging industry, that was really the turning point. And I know brands globally have really bought into that. But certainly in the last year or so, it seems to be there might be a bit of a shift globally from governments across the world. So is that potentially a bit of a concern in terms of sustainability message for our industry, or do you think sustainability definitely still is front and centre? It's just a case of changing administrations look at things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I think we're not quite as susceptible in this sector as we are in automotive, where that sort of move to electrified cars is just so big a consumer thing and a high cost to the consumer, and very much a change of focus from government has really sort of derailed that a little bit, you might say. Whereas when we look at packaging, I think ultimately consumers really understand recycled content as a metric, really can buy into the concept. I think brand owners and can makers themselves can all help with that messaging, and that's very powerful for the sector. So consistency from government is always a really important factor in business decisions in terms of investment and how where you spend your money, when you spend your money, and the timing of transition. And I just have to say that we're lucky we've embarked on our transition. We're going ahead regardless now. We have to, in a way. There's no turning back, you might say. But on the other hand, I think that will give us the opportunity to be first in the market with some of these products and really helping to demonstrate what's feasible for the industry. So I think we'll become a sort of lighthouse project for the sector, and I think we will be looked at to see, well, just what can Tata Steel achieve in this arena. So I do think that the geopolitical status is unfortunate, but I do think that overall we'll ride through it, and people will still want to see this transition made and certainly reap the benefits from it going from there.
That's really interesting to hear. So you're seeing the sustainability is not just a trend that's kind of a 3 to 5 year topic. It's something that's going to be transitional across multiple generations. So now that really is interesting to hear. And I just wanted to pick up on one thing you mentioned in terms of consumers. I know sustainability has really been picked up by consumers. Certainly the anti-plastic sentiment globally as consumers have really bought into. But in terms of recently, I know we've had cost of living pressures, inflationary pressures. So the average person's got a little bit less money in their pocket with mortgage rates rising and rents rising. So it's a question I've asked to quite a lot of people in the industry. I'm just wondering whether Is that having an impact on perhaps sustainability choices for consumers as a result? With less money in their pocket, it comes down to purchasing decisions more on price rather than sustainability, or do you think then the message is so strong, and particularly millennials and Gen Zs, they've grown up with sustainability being such an important issue that it's really, regardless of price, it's still an issue that's important, and consumers will make decisions on sustainability as one of the major impacts on decision making.
Interesting one that I think steel packaging is in an unusual position because that longevity of food, that general, we often see that when times are tight, people revert more to tinned food, canned foods generally, and actually it can be a sign, an actually positive period for us when there's sort of periods of affordability issues, etc. So I think we are slightly less susceptible in this particular arena than other parts of the industry. I do think people are going to have to make difficult choices and will be probably opting for less sustainable options unless they're truly affordable, and that really is unfortunate, but is the reality. If things do physically cost more to manufacture because they're more sustainable, then what we don't want to see is that these are not driven as solutions for customers going forward, because ultimately they can't be funded essentially. So as I say, just to summarize, I think the canned food industry is a slightly different to the general bellwether, shall we say, in this sector.
Yeah, I think that kind of subscribes to a colleague of mine recently said that the metal packaging industry is recession resistant rather than recession proof. So we obviously are susceptible to pressures from things such as inflation. But the reverting back to the trusty 3-piece can for food consumption is definitely a positive for this industry. So no, thank you very much for that. We interrupt this episode for a brief segment from our sponsors, PPG.
Packaging coatings from PPG draw on our company's 140-year history of innovation. We never stop improving our solutions to meet the evolving needs of can makers and the marketplace. That spirit of innovation results in technology like the cradle-to-cradle platinum-rated PPG Innovel Pro. PPG Innovel Pro is the latest enhancement to the world's #1 non-BPA beverage can coating. It still doesn't use any bisphenol ingredients, but experienced can makers report that it now sprays like an epoxy. Follow PPG Packaging Coatings on LinkedIn or visit packagingcoatings.com to learn more about why PPG is the coatings partner for can making excellence.
Want to take things back a little bit in terms of the electrifying packaging steel and some of the features involved of the electric arc furnace. It seems a really interesting concept, and I just want to focus on the domestic market here in the UK first of all, rather than just the global market. So how is the EAF supporting the domestic recycling to helping producing that recycling domestically?
Yeah, okay. So, well, first of all, as Tata Steel UK and as one of the steel makers in the UK, we're typically only consuming around 250,000 tonnes of scrap per year. So we say scrap is recycled content in that sense. And so our products realistically are only around 15 to 20% recycled content typically, based on our traditional blast furnace Boss processes. By transitioning to electric arc furnace, we're talking about a production process that is much more flexible in terms of its input materials. So we could actually put in the same recipe as you can in from a blast furnace Boss, a sort of 20% scrap, 80% iron recipe. We could physically do that, but the reality is that that's going to be a more costly method of making that ratio of iron to scrap than it would be using the blast furnace Boss method. By going to electric arc furnace, we are actually much better positioned to operate at higher recycled content and lower iron content. So it's all about the ratio of iron to scrap. So we'll see this across the industry. Anyone who truly wants to increase recycled content in particular, but also wants to reduce carbon footprint, is going to have to adopt some kind of electric furnace in the future. And we're one of those that's doing that first. Which is very exciting. And we will have the ability to flex our recycled content somewhere between typically 50 to about 80%. So really quite high recycled contents. And so that's going to put pressure on the domestic market for scrap. That's going to drive recycling rates, I think, and generally help with that overall demonstration. And people will see that physically in the products that they can then buy from products sold in the UK. So I think there should be some messaging through the chain, about recycled contents in products and the packaging used for them, and then that will feed back to us being a tenfold increase in total recycled content and a recycling of used materials, end of life in particular, products back into the steel sector in the UK.
That's great, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask in terms of how achievable 50% recycled content is in terms of packaging steel. But you intimated there that the aim for Tata Steel is between 50 to 80% by 2030. So the 50%, is that quite a conservative estimate then as a result? So it's definitely is achievable.
Right. Well, let's split that out a little bit more and give you some more insight on that. Ultimately, products have different requirements in terms of their formability and what we're actually trying to manufacture. And, the classic three-piece can, we've already manufactured some of these, and we're confident we'll exceed 50% recycled content on that type of product. But, of course, the recycled content that you achieve in a product, scrap is a steel product that was designed for a previous purpose, and not necessarily the purpose you're next using it for. And it may contain elements that make the steel stronger or less formable than it would have been. So it's all about scrap sorting and segregation. And the better we get at sorting and segregation of scraps, the higher the recycled contents that we can achieve. So when we first start up, I think we will see that some of the more formable products will have lower recycled contents, whereas the other end of the spectrum will be very high recycled contents. But as we get better at that scrap segregation and sorting, we'll be able to increase recycled contents and still meet the property requirements that our customers require.
That's great. And just in terms of, I can be guilty of it myself when you're talking about packaging and specifically metal packaging day in, day out. You can sometimes be a little bit immune from other industries. I think that's why it's great to talk to guys such as yourself who have got experience of multifaceted in this industry. So in terms of the packaging sector compared to, say, the automotive industry, for instance, where along the process are we in terms of being truly sustainable, in terms of recycled content, in terms of flying the flag for decarbonisation, carbon footprint, things like that? It's always good to get a bit of a perspective, because when I go to these conferences, we always say fly the flag in terms of we are metal is infinitely recyclable. That product can be back on the shelf in up to 60 days, patting ourselves on the back. But compared to other industries, are we doing as well as we should be, or is there work to be done? It's just sorry, there's quite a few questions there. It's an interesting one to unpack, and
it is. Yeah, very good. I think the infinite recyclability is really there. We're talking about atoms of metal that can be remelted back into atoms of metal. Plastics, they're molecules. Molecules fall apart after a while. They need remaking, shall we say. So you're always on a better footing with something that's made from atoms than you are from molecules, that in that sense. So it's a very scientific answer, but the reality is that recycling atoms is always going to be a better way forward. And iron is a particularly convenient metal in that not everything dissolves in it, and we can use what are called slags to remove elements from the steel when we're manufacturing it. So we're quite able to control scrap very cleverly and remake steel in the future. Sorry, would you like to prompt me a little bit more on some of those other points you wanted to talk
Yes,
about?
no problem. It was in terms of the industry as a whole. I mean, for packaging steel, compared to, say, the automotive industry, when we go to trade shows, when you go to trade shows, the industry kind of pats itself on the back saying we're a very with excellent in terms of sustainability concepts. But is that necessarily true? Because you're working in a few other industries that like to say they're sustainable as well. So it's I'm always wondering whether actually are we as good as we think we are sometimes when it comes to sustainability, or is there work to be done? It's just always good to get a perspective compared to other industries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we do actually see quite different behaviours, and because of the different markets, because of business to business versus business to consumer. So construction's an interesting one. If you take Greater London as an example, they've got targets for carbon footprints for new buildings, and that means the upfront carbon, as we would describe it, of the materials used to construct the building. So that's the concretes and the steels, etc. And they've got such tight, stringent targets that they're really keen to draw on low carbon footprint products where available. And it's for them, it's actually a way of actually attracting cheaper lending. So when they're building a building, they're borrowing money to invest in the building. Actually, they get offered lower interest rates if they can demonstrate that they have a green building. So there's quite a drive there in the whole cycle of construction, from building specifiers through the financiers, etc., to drive the circular economy and drive carbon footprint. In automotive, you've got a product that is multifaceted, many different material types, many different components. And what we're seeing the automotive players do is that they have the luxury of being able to put, low carbon footprint products into part of the vehicle, but not the whole vehicle. You don't have to specify the whole vehicle as low carbon footprint. So they have a means to reduce the carbon footprint of a vehicle through selection of different material types and different carbon footprints, and they can gradually meet their targets over time by moving to those types of materials. So they are probably brand image is probably the biggest single driver in the case of automotive to moving towards more recyclable, more sustainable materials. And that's probably where it's most like packaging, in that the brand owners can really drive this and really they have that consumer relationship and will want this going forwards.
No, that's brilliant. And in terms of you, I mean, you've been in the industry for over 30 years. In terms of where would this list on in terms of achievements for the company during that time? Is it right up there in terms of innovation for Tata Steel?
It certainly is. Yeah, really. We've had some innovative packaging innovations, as you know, with the Protact perhaps coated products, etc. So we are well up there in terms of innovation generally, but we've often been a fast follower, apart from a few exceptions. And really, this is one where we hope that we can take a lead. And yeah, it's one of the most exciting projects that we've had realistically, and it's such big scale. It's that's immense.
That's great to hear. And challenges along the way. I mean, 2030 is not too far away, so it seems like there's a lot of work to be done. So, is there any some kind of cautionary tales that Tata Steel need to make everybody aware of, or is it a case of heads down and this is definitely achievable during that time frame?
Yeah, obviously the market is affecting all of our suppliers, steelmakers across the board at the moment. It's a very depressed market. Their cash is tight, so spending is difficult and delaying investments. We're lucky that ours is essentially already agreed and funded. We've got a very large construction project to carry out. We're pretty confident we're ahead of time. We're actually laying the concrete for our slab yard in the coming weeks, so we're already getting some of the first aspects of our, you might put that our spades are going in the ground here, and we've got a massive national grid connection to have completed by 2027. But all of these are in plan for 2027. So we're really hoping that cold commissioning of our furnace will be on time for the end of that year and production soon after. I think perhaps the cautionary tale is really one just to make essentially the can makers and brand owners aware of, is that ultimately we need to work together to pull those materials through the supply chain. We need them testing, we need them approving, we need our customers to be confident they meet their property requirements. So it's really one of the pace at which, how soon before 2030 we can realise those ambitions is going to be a bit of a partnership through chain to make sure that everybody's happy with the product and it's specified to meet exactly the requirements needed.
Is that a challenge in an industry that is fairly conservative when it comes to decision making, and things don't necessarily happen just due to various issues and various stakeholders involved, that change doesn't always happen quickly. And if we want to achieve targets such as net zero for steel by 2045, that really is a challenge due to the multifaceted nature of the industry.
It does, and this is, people might not think of it as that, but this is a high-tech product with really quite high precision processes, and subtle changes to the metallurgy of the product could really upset those can-making processes, etc. So we've got to make sure that we're working together to give exactly the, really. Imagine an example. Imagine that the material coming into the plant is actually a mixture of traditional material and electric arc furnace material. Can a plant cope with that, or is it going to have to change over on a particular press to a specific product line so that it's set up well in advance? So there's some real practical issues that I think, very solvable and very, deliverable working together. But we do just need to be aware of them as we bring materials through and introduce them to the market.
That's great. And I just want to leverage your expertise as well in terms of, I know as a publication, the Metal Packager, since the Trump inauguration, it's been pretty much every day there's been, in the steel and aluminium industry, there's been talk of tariff information, not least this side of the pond as well, and the potential implications. Just from a brand point of view, how are you leveraging the challenges involved with tariffs globally, and also just your personal take on the industry as a whole? I mean, is this potentially going to be derailing the industry, or do you think the industry is going to come back stronger as a result?
I think tariffs are always very unfortunate and unhelpful across the board. We supply internationally and we do supply into the US, and this is very disruptive, really. You've got relationships with customers, they're long-standing, you've had a process route. They perhaps need to bring on new suppliers, which they didn't want to have to do, and that's a whole effort. So they really want to work with us. So I would say that, practically we're working with government to try and avoid the impacts of this, but we're also working with some of our customers so that they can influence government from their side to try and mitigate the impact of tariffs. So yeah, I think it's not going to derail the industry, I don't think, but it's certainly going to change trade flows in the short term and upset some well-established relationships, which is unhelpful across the board, I think, realistically.
Absolutely. So no, thanks very much for that overview as well. And just some concluding points from yourself, really, in terms of not to put words in your mouth, but is this a game changer for the steel industry, would you say?
Yes. I think it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. We're not going to be the only ones building such facilities, but we're one of the first, and we absolutely have the routes to market to demonstrate the capability and the opportunities that can be achieved from electric arc furnace steelmaking into packaging in particular. So, yeah, I think it's a game changer. I think we will see a big swing early on in certain product types. And then a gradual change of other products to electric arc furnace steelmaking, whether it be, however the feedstock comes into that furnace. So, yeah, I think it's a real game changer for the industry, and it's massively exciting to be involved in, I've got to say.
Yeah, I can hear the passion in your voice there in terms of potentially what this means for the industry. So no, I really, really appreciate that. And just from our side, thanks very much for your continued work within the steel sector. It's great to see that there's some true innovation happening in the industry, and the Metal Packager, we look forward to examining this in more detail, and perhaps we can catch up in a few months' time to see how things develop. So no, wish you all the best with the campaign, and look forward to speaking to you soon, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, Alex. And I have to say, there's lots happening in the coming year, so there'll be plenty to tell you about this time next year as an example, because a lot will have moved on.
Absolutely. It's never a dull moment in this industry at the moment, is it? So absolutely. So no, speak soon.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.